In Texas, a little girl who doctors said wouldn't survive is home from the hospital.
3-year-old Tinsley Lewis is now healthy enough to be cared for at home. That's according to the group Texas Right to Life, an anti-abortion organization. They joined Tinsley's mother to wage a legal battle to keep doctors from removing her from life-saving treatment after she was born premature in February of 2019. Tinsley had been hospitalized at Cook Children's Medical Center in Fort Worth. She's now receiving her care at home. Tom Graham, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate, put cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagatna location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yeah, that's Tall Tales. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right, Jose?
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. So let's see what we got for an editorial today. From the Post, as you were from the Daily News. We know what it's going to be from the Post without even looking. The Post has been on strike for almost 2 months now. The Daily News might just as well be. Here's the headline of the Daily News editorial. Our View, Guam ABLE Savings Program, good step forward for caregivers, individuals with disabilities. And it's about a special savings program. Jim Moylan comes to the rescue. They moved it from RevTax, as you were from the Department of Administration, to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. It fits right in there in that file that I have labeled ho-hum. Somewhere in the H's, ho-hum. And I suppose it's marginally better than no editorial, but I can stress the word marginally. I want an editorial that tells me something that I don't know, that points out something that I ought to know about, that leaves me saying, yeah, it's about time, or darn, that's bad news, or how dare you say that. But, you know, if all you have to write editorials with is kind of like editorial, if your editorial writing is to composition what hospital food is to eating, you're in trouble. You know, it's kind of like 3 different courses, all of them pablum, and that's kind of the Daily News much of the time.
Well, in that case, please pass the Tall Tales.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like salt.
We don't spare the spice here on Tall Tales, that's for sure. All right, so let's take a look at the card then for April 14. Tomorrow is April 15. The taxes are due tomorrow, except for one really strange thing. April 15 is a holiday in the District of Columbia. Therefore,
in Boston, Columbia, too. Boston has Patriots Day.
Not on the 15th.
I remember our taxes in Connecticut were always due the next day.
Yeah.
Patriots Day.
I should be able to remember Patriots Day because one Patriots Day, I started out in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, and ran 26.2 miles through past Wellesley and Heartbreak Hill, all the way down to the Prudential Center in downtown Boston. I think it's the 19th.
Oh,
Jose.
it's the 18th this year. Yeah, you're right. But something about Texas. But what's in D.C.?
It's a holiday, a District of Columbia holiday, and somehow the whole nation tax collection gets put off over the weekend because of a holiday in D.C. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
I think it's because of my sister, because it's her birthday. I had to put that in.
I like that better than the official explanation. All right, so here's what we got on the card. We got another episode of Systemic Racism brought to us by Paul Zerzan. What a guy. And then we've got Lee Weber versus Jesse Kinga. And a little bit more of GWHS and JoJo versus the girls. That's GWHS is Guam Woke High School. And I probably ought to spend a little bit more time on Jane's Follies. And then a little bit of Tall Tales versus KBJ. Let's see, I have another one here. Yeah, some of the stuff that's been on the card for a long time that I never got to. And I've explained before why the Ketanji Brown Jackson story is not over. It actually hasn't even begun yet. And I think it's really important to understand some of the salient facts about Ketanji Brown Jackson. Briefly, I spent a little time studying up on her background. I was pretty much impressed. She has come out and publicly stated that she is an originalist. Yeah, very unusual for somebody over there on the left who tells you that it's actually a living constitution. But her flirting with the critical race theory movement aspect, etc., to me is something that I don't think she can overcome. Robert Underwood, I'm sure, would disagree with me on that because he's been teaching critical race theory since 1972. All right, so let's go back to systemic racism. Now, you'll recall that I use systemic racism as a mechanism to illustrate the difference between the facts and the narrative, between the narrative and the truth, as it were. And Paul demonstrated that to us quite nicely by saying, hey, you guys, this stuff that you call red rice at the fiestas, open your eyes. It ain't red, it's orange. And the Daily News came back the next day, readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. Because the narrative was it's red. We don't care what some guy named Paul Zerzan says it is, even if he's right. It doesn't make any difference. That's not the narrative. So I've referred to systemic racism as this comes up in the show, and it comes up all the time because we live in the age of the narrative. The narrative is that if a man really wants to become a woman, he doesn't even need to put on the ruby slippers and click his heels and say, I want to be a woman 3 times. He is just a woman. And if we say that marriage is not between a man and a woman, it's not the cornerstone of the nuclear family, that a man can marry a man and a woman can marry a woman. If you can't get on the right side of that, you better get the hell out of here because we're going to silence you. You're a racist, a bigot, you have bad breath, body odor, all kinds of really bad things are going to happen to you. That's the narrative. So Paul wades in and says, I don't care about your narrative. I'm going to come forward with the facts and the truth. And he did it again today. The guy's incorrigible. He won't let the facts alone.
And he does it in 100 letters or less. 100 words or less.
He just comes right straight to the point. You know, he steps into the batter's box. That first pitch comes over the plate, and he smacks it right out of the park. None of this waiting for the right pitch or anything like that. So here's what he says today. Studies show that women who give birth have longer life expectancy, a lower risk of cancer, a reduced risk of diabetes, better memory, and are happier in middle age than women who don't give birth. It's a woman's health issue. This means that pro-abortionists that claim that abortion is a woman's health issue are incorrect. Abortion is about the health of an unborn baby. The debate about abortion concerns a single question. Does an unborn baby have a right to life? Abortion is the killing of an unborn baby, and no amount of bombastic and evasive debate can alter this simple fact. Classic Zerzan. Yeah.
That was it?
That's it. And it's really nice the way he talks about what woman's health really is. And if you're really concerned, women, if you're really concerned about your health, then you really need to have a baby because it's healthy. Now, does that make sense or what? You know?
Biologically, and I'm not a biologist,
Yeah.
but it would seem so.
Yeah. Now, if you just stop and think a little bit about human anatomy, almost all parts of the human being are made for a particular purpose, right? You use this thing to sniff and smell, not to see, right? You use your eyes to see and so on. And you use this part of your body to lift things. And it doesn't make much difference which part of your body, if you don't use it, you're probably going to lose it.
There's something called atrophy that happens to muscles.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And to other parts of the body. So the body is designed, the different parts of the body and the body as a whole are designed for a particular purpose. The woman's body is designed to have children. I know, what a horrible thing.
That's a misogynistic statement.
It's misogynistic, sexist. Why do you hate women so much, Bob?
Systemic racism right there.
Systemic racism, absolutely. A woman's body is designed to have children. And after the child is born, to nurture the child, right? That's why women have breasts. So if it's designed for that and it's used for that, how can it be anything but good for the woman? And how can interrupting that process, either with chemicals or surgery or whatever, how can it be anything but bad for the woman? So all of this talk about, it's a woman's health issue, it's just like Paul says, it's just dead wrong. And, of course, they would rather talk about that than the question that Paul Zerzan raises. Does an unborn baby have a right to life? They'd rather talk about politics, opportunism, Texas, women's reproductive rights, on and on and on, because, you know, if the hand that you're dealt with, you don't even have a pair of deuces, and you know the other side sitting over there with a royal flush, you're not going to bet very heavily. And that's exactly where they are. The anti-abortion folks got a royal flush. And the pro-abortion folks are sitting there with 5 cards, 4 different suits, not even this one pair. So it's no wonder they don't want to talk about the real issue. They want to invent issues like women's, or like straw men, like, you know, if these guys are really interested, if they're really pro-life, they would take better care of these children that are born into poor circumstances. That's what pro-life is all about. Yeah. All right, this next item, it ought to surprise me, but it doesn't. This whole ethics commission has been a bad idea from start to finish. It's been around for 2 years now, and so far, the only thing that the members of the ethics commission have shown us is we understand GovGuam and we know how it works. You have to have a budget, and then you get an office, and then an executive director and a staff, probably a lawyer, have somebody draw up rules and regulations for you, do a lot of press releases, and make sure that you keep close track of your leave and all that sort of thing. Do you have a mission? Oh, yeah, somewhere here, somewhere in these papers, we have a mission. So they finally claim that they're ready to entertain complaints now, and they do one release that they're entertaining complaints, and then what's the next release they come up with? Pure female bovine excrement. Frustrated ethics complainants admit to thoughts of suicide. This ran in the Post. The buildup of the Ethics Commission has no doubt been long coming. Whoa. But it appears the weight of holding on to certain allegations has taken its toll on some residents. I don't believe that for a second. Since it began accepting complaints in early March, the Commission has heard from complainants who have admitted to harboring thoughts to suicide, according to Jesse Kanga, Executive Director of the Commission. Well, judging by the way they do business, I don't think the Commission has heard any of this. I think Jesse Kanga has heard it, or at least he said he's heard it. And then he says, quoting Kanga, what we have recognized is from the start of receiving complaints, there have been several complainants who arrived frustrated, understandably, and have admitted they carry thoughts of suicide. What in the world kind of a government agency is one that says, you know, some of our customers are thinking about suicide? Kanga told commissioners that during a March 31 meeting. To prepare commission staff to respond to these situations, the office, now who do you suppose the office is? Jesse Kanga, has signed everybody up to go through grief counseling and suicide prevention training. How about open government law training, Jesse Kanga? This will be conducted by a team at the Behavioral Health and Wellness Center this month, he told the Post. The local law that reestablished, and it didn't reestablish it, it was been on the books for 15 years. The Ethics Commission is now many years old, but the Commission hadn't held its inaugural meeting until September 2019. Even then, with financial and other resources issues, it has taken 2 years to set up an office. 2 years. You know, we won World War II in 4 years, for crying out loud, and it takes these guys 2 years to set up an office. The Ethics Commission office assisted 10 individuals between March 8th and March 30. From those individuals, 6 cases completed their intake process and were listed as confidential matters on the commission meeting agenda. Commissioners discussed those cases during the March 31 meeting, but it was done in private. Now, this is a John O'Connor story, who's usually pretty much on the ball. He let this go, a private meeting. The office is also hoping to soon launch the commission's website. This will give complainants an opportunity to review procedures and the complaint application form, as well as the application for suicide prevention training. The website will also include resources like gift disclosure forms, commission meeting packets, and a calendar of events for ethics training and commission meetings, Kanga said. So
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that list of ethics violations and why he needed to talk about suicide.
no reason whatsoever. No reason whatsoever except I need a little earned media to further my career. It's got nothing to do with the Ethics Commission. It's nothing to do with anything. And he didn't break any rules of confidentiality, but he did break the rule of good taste. If I went to a government agency and I were in that particular frame of mind and I told somebody, I wouldn't want to hear about it on TV or in the newspaper, if it's actually even true. All right, so that lays the foundation for the story that ran in the Post today. John O'Connor picked up on it. Ethics Commission Director, Vigilance Committee disagree when meetings can be kept from public. The Vigilance Committee, Inc., an organization dedicated to ensuring compliance with the open government law, has set its sights on the Guam Ethics Commission as the latest agency to have allegedly violated the open government law. Do you want to take a break, Jose? Yeah, let's take a short break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So I noticed that, Jose, Raymond McGravy is watching from Mandan, North Dakota. Now, if you lived in Mandan, North Dakota, you know what you'd probably have for breakfast? A Bismarck.
I've heard of that. What's a Bismarck, though?
Raymond, I'm sure, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And it's probably the only international radio listening audience who catches the attempted humor in my statement. All right, let's get back to Lee Weber versus Jesse Kanga. The commission's executive director has stated that the enabling law requires commission matters be handled in private and that there is no violation as alleged. However, in response to the Director Vigilance Committee, Lee Weber contended that the director's reading of the enabling law was overbroad and maintained that a violation did occur. Weber had referred to a March 31 meeting in which commissioners met in private to discuss 6 cases listed as confidential matters on the meeting agenda. How do we know that? We don't know that's what they discussed. They could very well have been talking about Carl Gutierrez versus the Guam Visitors Bureau. We don't know. Reference to the agenda for March 31 of the meeting published on GovGuam Public Notices portal shows no reference to an executive session. If it ain't on the agenda, you can't do it. No provision in the organic legislation for the Ethics Commission allows for the commission to, quote, meet in private, Weber stated in a letter to the Ethics Commission, adding that the alleged violation was especially egregious in light of the commission's mandate to provide a government ethics program that includes the open government law. So the last thing we need is to have this clown teaching people about the open government law. According to the law, any action taken in violation of the open government law is void. And Weber requested notice of a, quote, curative meeting as a result of the alleged violation. Well, if the meeting's void, then you got to do it again. Start over from scratch.
No hugging seminars.
Yeah, properly notice it up. However, Ethics Commission Executive Director Jesse Kanga stated that under the Commission's enabling law, it's clear that the legislature intended for deliberations, investigations, and decisions to be dealt with in a confidential matter until the commission can release information. Well, I've studied that law, and I've studied the open government law, and it's just not true. What Kanga says is not true. And if he were correct, if he said it's clear that the legislature intended for deliberations to be dealt with in a confidential matter, that's what the law would have said. It's not for Jesse Kanga to go around and saying, well, this is what they really wanted. The legislature also imposed a criminal penalty for breaching confidentiality, Kanga noted. These provisions were enacted specifically to the Ethics Commission, and the policy is to prefer specific mandates over non-specific ones. He said, no. While the open government law provides for an executive session to meet on litigation matters, in the case of the Ethics Commission, not only is there no similar actual or potential legal matter or risk when the commission goes about its business examining allegations of breaches of ethical conduct. Now, of course, we don't know if counsel went into that meeting with them, because if he did, then they got to do this. They got to do the whole thing. And if he didn't, why do they have him? Unlike other, not only is there no similar actual or potential legal matter or risk when the commission goes about its business examining allegations of breaches of ethical conduct, unlike other investigative agencies, which are prohibited from deliberating in confidence or with privilege, the commission is mandated by statute on risk of criminal penalty to maintain confidence and keep records private. Okay, keep your records private, but don't go meeting in secret. Don't go meeting in a private meeting. The commission's policy of treating matters before it in confidence until release is allowed by law is intended to attain the greatest level of integrity of highly sensitive investigations proceedings, commissioners' deliberations, and other actions in pursuit of its mandate. In response, Weber stated that confidentiality requirement kicks in only when the commission investigates, adding that the commission is now, and that's what the statute says. So, once again, an overbroad reading of the statute. Weber added that the commission is now on notice that the meetings are to be public unless an executive session is properly invoked. The commission's meeting in private is a serious violation of the open government law and cannot be tolerated. This letter is the Vigilance Committee's demand that the Ethics Commission strictly comply with the open government law and provide notice of such curative meeting that the commission undertakes. Weber said. Yeah, it's just, there's this, I suppose, unconscious desire to not let people know what you're doing. So they put the complaints on their agenda. They marked them confidential. There was nothing to stop them from noticing up an executive session with counsel, and in the notice listing the 6 confidential complaints, going in there and discussing it and doing all of the things that are required when you meet with counsel, and decide what they were going to do after that. But even that is inappropriate because they haven't investigated yet, according to their own stuff. there's nothing to discuss until there's been an investigation. So they have their 6 confidential investigations, which every one of the members has seen. One member makes a motion. I move that we investigate complaint number 1. And when the investigation is done, then it's time for the executive session. But why should anybody expect these guys to do anything right when they haven't so far? They don't want to break their string, so to speak. Okay.
You said that the Ethics Commission has counsel.
Yes.
So why is the director interpreting law and not getting a quote from counsel?
Well, maybe counsel ghost wrote it for the director, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I'm nitpicking, I know, but if I'm going to say a statement like that, I'm going to say counsel said, or I was counseled, or I got this quote from, because it sounds like he's just making it up.
Well, yeah, it does. It's like the suicide thing. Sounds like he's just making it up. All right, well, I'm going to watch this thing like a hawk because this Ethics Commission has small potential to do anything well and great potential to really screw things and people up badly if they don't get straightened out. And I'm not optimistic about that. All right, next we've got Daily News versus Jojo Santo Tomas. I spent some time on this yesterday. This is about the rugby game between Guam Woke High School and Tijan High School. And this was the girls' rugby league, and they're playing rugby sevens. Now, what that means is there are only 7 players on a team, when the ordinary rugby game has 15 players on the team. So rugby sevens, fewer players, shorter games, and they played 3 games back-to-back here. And it's a girls' league, and Tijan fielded a team that was, guess what? All girls. Yeah. If you were to do the DNA on, as far as I can tell, if you were to do a DNA on these girls, every one of them had 2 X's for chromosomes. They were all girls. The Tijan team put on the field all girls except for 1, and that was a boy. And the boy literally ran over the girls. 3 girls got hurt. In Patrick Lujan's story, one of the parents, Patrick said that one of the parents said that the boy was smashing the girls and called it an oddity seeing him on the field, as the athlete was clearly physically taller and bigger than the rest of the girls on the field. Well, not the rest of the girls, you mean the girls on the field. So, nobody wants to come out and tell this story what it really is. And what the real story is this. There's a girls' rugby league, and there was a game between 2 girls' teams, and one of the teams put a boy on the field. And the boy literally and figuratively ran over the girls and hurt 3 of them. Now, wouldn't you think that when this became apparent, and it became apparent according to Patrick's story, just about from the get-go, wouldn't you think that if you were the coach of the all-girls team, that you would say, hey, ref, time out. Let's get the guy off the field. This is girls rugby. This is not guys rugby. And if the referee doesn't do it, what do you do?
Do what the academy did.
You walk away. Otherwise, whatever happens, you're complicit. You're going along with the narrative is what you're doing. Well, I didn't want to say anything because, as though you can change the entire history of the human race by uttering one word, Jose. Transgender. Yeah, that's all you need to do. And everything turns inside out. Well, yeah, he's a guy, but he's transgender, so you know. So what did the coach of what did the coach of the all-girls team do about it? Well, he released a statement. Let's see. Here's what he said. I believe... Can I have the right kind of music here? You know that song, I believe, for every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows?
I don't have that, but I know that song.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what Coach Kerner said. I believe that we all should have the utmost respect for the life identity choices that are made by any person and embrace those choices. Isn't that wonderful? So understanding. Yeah. In other words, if the guy thinks he's a girl, we should have an utmost respect for his life identity choices, and we should embrace those choices. Then he goes on to say, however, I must take a more firm stance. A more firm stance instead of the wishy-washy first sentence that poured out of my mouth, right?
So I guess he admits the first one was limp.
Yeah. On defending the safety of our youth athletes. Doesn't he mean girls? Youth athletes. When those choices impede upon the physical well-being of others. This is a coach. This is, supposed to be a role model. Someone was a principled person, a strongly principled person that the athletes can look up to. And he comes up with psychobabble like this.
I'm more worried about damaged reputation than damaged female athletes.
Exactly. I don't know the guy. I never heard of him before, but I suspect that he tests positive for the social justice warrior virus. Yeah, that's what he said. Now, Guam Woke High coach Joe Mancuso maybe comes out ahead because Joe Mancuso was texted for a comment but did not reply. He didn't say anything. So the Daily News ran a story saying, well, there was a rugby game, and this is who played. Never touched on it. And then, let's see here. Yeah, I had another one, but I didn't bring it along. Yeah, so, where does your hypocrisy take you? I don't want to see the girls get hurt, but in the process of protecting the girls, I'm not going to put myself at risk in any way whatsoever. I'm going to come up with a politically correct psychobabble. I wouldn't even think of calling a timeout and asking the referee to remove the boy from the girls' game. Now, I have something here that adds a little bit of perspective to this whole thing. It's not as elegant as Coach Kerner, and it comes from the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, a gentleman named Mark Robinson. And here's what Mark Robinson said. He delivered a speech in August at the upper room of the Church of God in Christ in Raleigh, North Carolina. Here's what he said. Ain't but two genders. Two genders ain't nothing but men and women. You can go to the doctor and get cut up. You can go down to the dress shop and get made up. You can go down there and get drugged up. But at the end of the day, you're just a drugged up, dressed up, made up, cut up man or woman.
I saw that.
Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. North Carolina, boy, they know what's going on.
That was Lieutenant Governor? Oh, man.
Yeah.
It sounded like he was a preacher from the pulpit.
Well, that's the kind of... Can you imagine our Lieutenant Governor saying something like this?
I don't think the UN would allow him.
Yeah. And he says, you can't change what God put in you, that DNA. You can't transcend God's creation. I don't care how hard you try. Then he goes on to say the transgender movement in this country, if there's a movement in this country that is demonic and it is full of the spirit of the Antichrist, is the transgender movement, Robinson said. He said Christians, and here's a key word or key phrase, he said Christians and grown-ups must be unafraid to tell the truth. And that's exactly the point. Coach Kerner, hey, ref, hold on, time out, ref. There's a boy out there playing for Guam Woke High School. He can't be out there. It's a girls' game. Get him off the field. Yeah. And how about the referee? Doesn't the referee have some kind of responsibility? You know, suppose I went out there to play. Would they just allow it?
So not just the athletes were blindsided.
Yeah.
But that comes to question, like, there were reporters on the field, obviously. Aren't there any footage of parents on the sidelines going, what's going on? Why is my daughter down there on the ground right now? I mean, it is rugby. I know it is a contact sport, but there's something a little different about a guy plowing through a bunch of girls.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Governor Robinson goes on and he says, it's time for us to stand up, and I'm not afraid to stand up and tell the truth about the issue. They're dragging our kids down into the pit of hell, trying to teach them that mess in our schools. Tell you like this, that ain't got no place at no school, Robinson said. 2 + 2 don't equal transgender. It equals 4. We need to get back to teaching them how to read instead of teaching them how to go to hell. Lieutenant Governor Robinson has been consistently outspoken on issues of life and gender. There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth, Robinson said in June of 2021. And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it, that I called it filth, come and see me, and I'll explain it to you. It's time for us to stop letting these children be abused at these schools, and it's not going to happen until the people of God stand up and demand different, he said. He shared on March 24 how a past experience with abortion helped shape his pro-life views. Over 33 years ago, before we were married and before we had kids, we had an abortion. It was the hardest decision we ever made, Robinson said, and sadly we made the wrong one. This decision has been with me ever since. It's because of this experience and our spiritual journey that we are adamantly pro-life. We know what it's like to be in that situation. We know that pain that an abortion causes. A politician, just looking for votes, no doubt, right?
Must be an election year.
Exactly. All right, let's see who we got here. We got Bill about Ethics Committee in violation of the Open Government Law. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Mr. Klitzkie.
Sir.
Well, I hear you a couple of days, and you keep mentioning it's a violation of law. Is that what we voted the AGs to investigate and prosecute or something like that?
Well, the Attorney General ought to be paying attention to things like this, and he has the ability to prosecute. He has only gotten on top of one open government law violation. That was with the CCU, and that's been a couple years ago.
Time for somebody new, I guess.
No objection.
The next question on the pro-life.
Uh-huh.
I agree with your point, but if a woman's been raped and impregnated, that is done by an evil person. I have to agree if the woman wishes not to have that child, if you know what I mean.
No, I don't, Bill, because is the child evil?
No. But
Should the child
an evil person.
should the child be punished because of something that someone else did? If you are in favor of life and if you're against murdering children in the womb, then the fact that, it's either one way or another, Bill, as far as I can see, and I'm in favor of the child.
Yes, I agree all the way to that one issue that disturbs me when it's done by an evil person, if you know what I mean, and the genes of that evil person is passing along to another genes, you know what I mean?
Not exactly. What you're talking about here is kind of a eugenics, and the fact that that the father is an evil person is not necessarily inherited by that innocent, helpless child. That's the product of that transaction.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up with me.
Okay, Bill.
The third one,
Uh-huh.
transgender.
Uh-huh.
Since I've grown up, since the 70s, 80s, and 90s, boys' sports and women's sports, if a transgender wants to join a sport, to a women's sport because he couldn't progress in the male sport, maybe they should just get another sport for transgenders only.
Well, I'm going to say something that will upset some people and cause them to call me name. Maybe we should have a league for weak sisters.
That sounds great to me because that is unfair for the women. I heard there was a college athlete for...
You're absolutely right, Bill. You know, at one time, we didn't spend much money at all on women's sports. And now a battery of laws have come along and said, whatever you do for the guys, you got to do for the girls. And women's sports have come a long way, and it has benefited women greatly. I think it's a wonderful thing. But it's spoiled by this whole transgender thing, Bill.
I have to agree with you in that.
Did I get to the end of your list?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Good talking to you, Bill. Got to take a break.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate, put cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Where let's put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Okay, so here we are heading for the big whole halftime show here, and I noticed that our listener from Mandan, North Dakota, chimed in and described an Otto von Bismarck breakfast. I guess I better explain. Maybe I'm the only one here that knows what a Bismarck is, but a Bismarck is a round pastry filled with a form of jelly. It's called a Bismarck. I should probably look it up and find out. I suppose it has something to do with Prime Minister Bismarck. But that's what a Bismarck is. Now, if you were to be in Mandan, North Dakota, there's a city just right across the river from you that's the capital of North Dakota. And you know what the name of it is? Bismarck.
Now, is that was that settled by Germans as well?
I suspect so, yeah.
Because in Wisconsin, you guys have a pastry also that's pretty famous around the Milwaukee area, the Kringle.
That's Danish.
Oh, that's Danish.
It's
oh,
Danish.
German Danish. Come on.
Yeah, and Racine is the
Yes, Racine. That's right.
the Kringle capital of the United States.
Is that similar to the Bismarck?
No, it's actually better. Bismarck's a little too sweet for me. But there are a lot of Germans in North Dakota. Lawrence Welf, of course, famous resident of North, didn't learn to speak English until he was 21. He didn't have to. He lived in North Dakota. And the 1 and the 2 and the 3. Turn off the bubble machine. All right, so let's get back to some serious business here. The Florist Follies. You know, we talked about the Florist Follies. We've been talking about the Florist Follies all week, and the bishop was supposed to make a statement today. And if he did, he must have gotten in cahoots with Jesse Kanga, and they must have done it in a private meeting because I cruised around the net a little bit, checked all of the media outlets, went to the archdiocese, etc. I wasn't able to find anything about the bishop's speech. And there is so much for the bishop to say here. Some of the same things that you said yesterday, Jose, and let's just kind of dwell on that for a moment. As far as Catholicism is concerned, as I remember, and help me with my memory here, abortion is intrinsically evil, correct?
Absolutely.
And under no circumstances can it ever be licit.
Never. Not even solicited.
Yeah.
Promoted.
Yes, and anyone who solicits, promotes, aids, and abets, covers up whatsoever is also guilty of what Catholics call a mortal sin, right?
Absolutely.
And one who commits that mortal sin, and this is where a certain degree of misunderstanding probably has arisen until people started listening to tall tales. One who commits that sin, whether that person has an abortion or facilitates one or does one, is excommunicated upon doing that act, right? Doesn't take the bishop, it doesn't take the pope, it doesn't take filing of papers or any tribunal or anything, correct?
Latae sentete, I think is the word, right?
Yeah.
Automatic excommunication.
Yeah, just the act itself excommunicates you from the church. And if you are excommunicated, then when it comes time to take communion, you cannot take communion. You can go to Mass, but you cannot take communion.
It's physically possible. What you're doing is compounding on that mortal sin. You're further separate. Well, you can't further separate yourself. You're putting yourself in a grave position, and they call it spiritual death.
Okay. So a person, let's say a person who performs an abortion or assists someone or whatever, not the woman herself, is then executed and goes to church. You can go to Mass every Sunday, correct?
Absolutely.
Go to Mass, but when it comes time for the Eucharist, one who takes the Eucharist who is not in a state of grace, which means free from sin at that moment, then compounds the wrong.
Now, there's something very important to clarify. A mortal sin is defined as a mortal sin, not just the sin itself. It has to be intrinsically evil. The person who commits it has to have knowledge of it, and then thirdly, has to intentionally commit it despite having that knowledge.
I got it. All right.
But, those are things that people have to have in the heart, but we also talked about scandal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one would hope that the bishop would go through the same class that you went through.
Yeah, those are called apologetics, and they should know all of that already.
Yeah.
They don't have to know canon law because there are canon laws in clergy, canon lawyers for that. There's a few of them here on island, but it's not hard to find.
Yeah. So one would hope that the bishop in his address would go through the same things that you went through yesterday. And yesterday you talked about the difference between judgment and
admonishment.
Admonishment, right?
Judgment, we are forbidden because only God can do that, determine whether you go to heaven or you or bring yourself to hell. And admonishment is a warning, so to speak. You're on the path to hell, and we're here to help you.
So the bishop then could take this opportunity to talk to admonish, and I've got their names here: Anita Areola, Ellen Bez, Annie Bordallo, Mariana Cook-Hoon. Let me come back to this right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Facing federal charges, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Frank James, the man police say opened fire Tuesday morning on a New York subway train, now charged with terrorism against mass transit.
My office and our law enforcement partners will use every tool at our disposal to bring this individual justice and bring justice to New Yorkers and restore safety and peace of mind to all.
That's U.S. Attorney Breon Peace, who says conviction could mean life in prison. Police say James called them Wednesday afternoon and told them his location. He'd left by the time they got there, but they found him nearby with the help of an alert security camera installer. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warning there'll be more atrocities unless his forces can repel Russian invaders.
The images of Bucha and Mariupol have demonstrated real Russians' intentions to the whole world. It could only be stopped by force of arms. It must be done now. Ukraine needs weapon supplies.
And the Biden administration answering that call with another $800 million in military aid.
It includes, for the first time, howitzer artillery, marking a shift in the Biden administration's posture on heavier weapons. It also has armored personnel carriers, counter-artillery radars, and 11 Mi-17 helicopters, which can be used in a combat role.
Fox's Griff Jenkins in western Ukraine. President Zelensky also suggesting a prisoner swap. His soldiers held in Russia in exchange for a pro-Russian Ukrainian politician now charged with treason, said to be close to Vladimir Putin. More severe weather Wednesday evening.
It looks like there were tornadoes across Mississippi and then at least one in Kentucky, and potentially there will be more than just one.
National Weather Service meteorologist Jeremy Graham says the threat of more storms overnight is diminishing, but in much of North Dakota, a blizzard warning continues through Thursday evening. America is listening to Fox News.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing The Point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
The surging cost of energy pushed wholesale prices up a record 11.2% last month from a year ago. The producer price index climbed at the fastest rate year over year on record. But on Wall Street Wednesday, the Dow gained 344 points. NASDAQ added 272. The S&P 500 closed 49 points higher. Some items you buy from the country's biggest online retailer may soon cost a bit more.
Merchants that sell products on Amazon's website will be hit with a 5% fuel and inflation fee beginning on April the 28th. The new surcharge, which won't be permanent, is a first for the e-commerce giant. The new fee will apply to U.S. sellers who use fulfillment by Amazon. The change amounts to an extra 24 cents per product stored and shipped. Inflation has skyrocketed in recent months, and gas prices have surged since the Russia-Ukraine conflict, with businesses grappling with rising costs. Last month, ride-sharing companies Uber and Lyft tacked on fuel surcharges to offset rising expenses. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
In Florida, admissions of voter fraud.
2 residents of The Villages, the giant retirement community in Central Florida, are pleading guilty in a state court to voting more than once on Election Day 2020. 63-year-old Jay Klitzkie and 64-year-old Charles F. Barnes were facing 5 years in prison, but will only serve community service and be made to take a civics course. Barnes has no party affiliation, but Klitzkie is a registered Republican. 2 other co-defendants are pleading not guilty and are awaiting trial. In Broward County, Florida, Evan Brown, Fox News.
Actor Cuba Gooding Jr. has pled guilty to forcibly kissing a worker at a New York nightclub back in 2018. It's a plea deal that's likely to keep him out of jail. Gooding also publicly apologizing for the first time to 2 other women accused him of similar behavior, calling himself a celebrity figure who meant no harm. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mescla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options, options, options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mescla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mescla.
Hafa Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
It's another great halftime show here that we were treated to on Tall Tales, and now we're back for the second half of Tall Tales this Thursday afternoon, starting already to be dreading tomorrow, which is the last day of the week. Jose and I, well, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's a tough one for us. So, Jose, we were talking about the difference between admonishment and judgment. Could you explain that again?
Sure thing. Judgment occurs when you're condemning somebody or you're reading somebody's soul when you really shouldn't be, knowing what their intentions are. Where admonishing is you're seeing something on the external or something they've talked about where they could be headed to a place where they a point of no return. And that's actually for Christians, for Catholics, that's something that Jesus commanded in Scripture, and I think that's in Matthew. I'm not a Bible quoter, but I know that's in the book of Matthew. And so there's a difference between admonishing somebody, letting somebody know where they're headed, something that's wrong, and telling somebody that you're going straight to hell and there's no recourse. Because we also talked about reconciliation yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, so let me let you answer the phone, and I'll talk a little bit about admonishment here and the bishop's speech that he was going to give this morning. And you know, it seems that it could have been appropriate for the bishop to admonish these folks that appear to be exactly what we're talking about, those who favor abortion, foster it, promote it, etc. And they all signed off on a letter to the Post, and their names are Anita Areola, Ellen Bez, Annie Bordallo, Mariana Cook-Huynh, Lisa Dames, Maneka de Oro, Jane Flores, Regine Bisco-Lee, Carlotta Leon Guerrero, Stephanie Lorenzo, Michelle Wakalo, Vanessa Williams, and Kiana Yabud. So that would seem to me like the kind of thing that the bishop might want to consider doing at a time like this, where I'm going to ask Jose to get into scandal here as soon as he gets off the phone. When we have people who are Catholics, notable Catholics, and who would be subject to an admonishment, this creates what Jose identified as scandal yesterday. So, Jose, I wonder if you might pick up on that and tell us what scandal means.
Oh, scandal. Okay, scandal. I know a lot of people have an idea of scandal in their mind, something that's defined as scandalous, can cause shame, and usually it's an act that's really egregious. But scandal in the Catholic Church pretty much means an attitude, or I'm just going to read from a part of the Catechism, which is kind of like the handbook, an attitude or behavior which leads another to do evil. This person who gives scandal becomes his neighbor's tempter. He damages virtue and integrity. He may even draw his brother into spiritual death. And what it is it has a lot to do with you kind of become a participant to an action or to a sin by omission. You're not admonishing properly. You can be participating in an action that makes it seem like that person is in a certain state of grace, especially a public figure who has done a public action against the church, but still, like, for example, is receiving communion and is given communion by a priest. And we have to understand also that do we know this priest is aware or not? And sometimes these public figures, it's kind of hard to think a priest doesn't know what's going on, or at least their pastor or their clergy of their church. There is an example that I read, and I'm trying to find it here. An example of omission where somebody doesn't want to denounce something for the sake of being nice. Like, for instance, when there's somebody who's a notorious felon who attends a parish and everybody knows what he's doing. When confronted by upset parishioners, the pastor replies, "Look, he really loves his family. His many good actions should speak for themselves." In this case, the pastor's words may be truth, but he scandalizes by omission. He does not denounce the sin. So if you know somebody who is an adulteress, who's going around and cheating on his wife, but he also gives to the community and probably is a well-known person who helps in charities, that doesn't balance out his transgressions. And to omit talking about that sin or admit the damage he's doing to his family is causing scandal.
How about in the context we're dealing with now?
Exactly. Let's say, for instance, person number A is a well-known public figure, well-known in the Catholic community, has lobbied for abortion legislation, who has lobbied against, for instance, the heartbeat bill, and goes up in line for communion, and let's say that the priest or pastor knows about this person's public acknowledgments, but still gives that person communion. That can create a scandal as well. Now, we might not know if they went to confession beforehand or not. However, the public opposition or the public support of abortion is still there in a lot of people's minds, and that can create a scandal too. Some people may say, what's going on with the priest, or the other people can say, oh, the church might think that this is acceptable. And that's the reason why we have to be very careful about how we view public speak and how we view sin as Christians, as Catholics.
It's kind of hard to get around this idea of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 women, if they are Catholic, signing on to this letter to the Daily News that begins, "Dear editor, it's like clockwork." Remember that letter? Yeah. So...
And also, you know, for those who are listening and those who are listening that know people who are following these people who signed on to this letter and are Catholics or are practicing Catholics, help them to understand that there is no way getting around abortion as an activity and not have to address it as a sin as well. It's pretty black and white as far as the church goes, as far as morality and ethics in the church goes.
Okay, well, thank you, Jose. So I'll be looking forward. I hope that someone will print the bishop's speech tomorrow. I'll be looking forward to seeing what he says.
Well, let me add one more thing to the archbishop or any of the clergy. One of the things that's incumbent upon them is because they are people of authority, scandal has a greater degree when there's a mission by someone from authority.
Okay. All right, nice synopsis, Jose. Let me go on. I'm going to go finally get to Judge Jackson, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and this is kind of old now, and I've explained that she has been confirmed to the Supreme Court, but that's not the end of the story. You know, I read in the paper, I saw an article in today's paper where Anita Hill was beating up on Republicans. You remember Anita Hill testifying against Clarence Thomas, and she thought she was treated poorly. And of course, Anita Hill can't open her mouth without the word racism coming out. And she says the same thing with Ketanji Brown Jackson, that the questions that the Republicans asked her were so inappropriate and so obviously racist. And I've kind of laid it out here that as far as I could tell about Ketanji Brown Jackson, a fair judge. Some people are pretty upset with her sentencing practices on certain kinds of sex offenses. I'm not going to get wrapped around that axle. She has said in public that she favors the originalist approach to constitutional interpretation, which is a real plus for her. She seems to be very bright and conscientious, and these are all good things. But the critical race theory thing, that's my concern. And I don't see that it's possible to favor the appointment to anyone to the Supreme Court who embraces the critical race theory. Because if you buy into critical race theory, there's no need to study briefs, listen to oral argument, be a scholar, etc. All you have to know is the various racial hierarchy of the people involved in the case. If the appellant is white and the appellee is black, obviously the appellee prevailed in the obviously the appellee didn't prevail in the did prevail in the court below, so therefore you sustain the court below. You rule for the appellee because the appellee is black. And to not rule for the appellee, to rule for the appellant, you're just furthering systemic racism. That's an oversimplification, but that's the way it's explained. So Jackson told students in the 2015 legislature that critical race theory influences sentencing policy. I quote, "I also tried to convince my students that sentencing is just plain understanding on an intellectual level, in part because it melds together myriad types of law, criminal law, of course, but also administrative law, constitutional law, critical race theory, negotiations, and to some extent even contracts. And if that's not enough to prove to them that sentencing is a subject worth studying, I point out that sentencing policy implicates and intersects with various other intellectual disciplines as well, including philosophy, psychology, history, statistics, etc. But she says criminal law, administrative law, constitutional law, critical race theory, of course. Also, in a 2020 lecture, Jackson cited a book that influenced the creation of critical race theory as an important part of her childhood. During the same 2020 lecture, Jackson cited the late Derek Bell, whose work included, as were influenced the creation of CRT, and said his 1993 book, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, The Permanence of Racism, was an important part of her childhood.
We're talking about Judge Jackson?
That's right.
Her childhood critical race theory is an important part of it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to guess around 1972.
Of course. Just like Robert. Judge Jackson's Sentencing Commission records would shed light on whether she used critical race theory to influence sentencing policy, but Democrats have let's see here. I kind of lost my pagination here. Well, there's another one. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, President Biden's Supreme Court nominee, praised the controversial 1619 project. Yeah, that's Hannah Jones from the Times. And its author, Nicole Hannah Jones, during a Martin Luther King Jr. Day address at the University of Michigan 2 years ago. In a January 2020 lecture titled Black Women Leaders in the Civil Rights Movement Era and Beyond, Jackson described Hannah Jones as an acclaimed investigative journalist, which he's not, and highlighted Hannah Jones' provocative assertion that America that was born in 1776 was not the perfect union that it purported to be. Here's more. The same theme resounds through 1619, the popular new historical accounting published by the New York Times. These are Brown Jackson's words. Acclaimed investigative journalist Nicole Hannah Jones explains that the men who drafted and enacted the Constitution founded this nation on certain ideals: freedom, equality, democracy. Yet at the time they formulated these principles, the institution of slavery already existed in the colonies ever since 1619, when 20 to 30 Africans who had been captured in their homeland arrived in the colonies by ship and were exchanged for goods. Jones highlights the irony of the situation even further when she notes that the very moment that Jefferson penned the self-evident truth of the Declaration of Independence, a black relative, a slave, had been brought into his office to serve him. Thus, it is Jones' provocative thesis that the America that was born in 1776 was not the perfect union that it purported to be, and that it is actually only through hard work, struggles, and sacrifices of African Americans over the past 2 centuries that the United States has finally become the free nation that the framers initially touted. These are not the kind of things I expect to hear from a Supreme Court justice. In an especially poignant segment of the podcast, Jones says, this is Hannah Jones, we are raised to think about 1776 as the beginning of our democracy. But when that ship arrived on the horizon in 1619, the decision made by the colonists to purchase that group of 20 to 30 human beings was the beginning too. And I've pointed out on the show that that's just wrong history. That's a classic Anne Parassatori. That isn't what happened. It's a good story, but that's not what happened. The first 30 people brought from Africa were brought as indentured servants, just like the people brought from England and Ireland. It was 50 years after that the actual slavery of those folks began. And then she goes on to say, Hannah Jones won a Pulitzer Prize for commentary last year for the project that was named Time's list of 100 most influential people. Historians have flagged the project for incorrect statements and interpretations. 5 academic historians signed a letter claiming the 1619 project got several elements of history wrong, including a claim that the Revolutionary War was fought to preserve slavery. So not the kind of thing not the kind of scholarship that you expect from a Supreme Court nominee. Here's from Christopher Rufo. Ketanji Brown Jackson told Ted Cruz that she never studied critical race theory, but she has cited the founder of critical race theory, Derek Bell, and endorsed its core concepts, including white privilege and intersectionality in her speeches. Let's head for Churchill, as it were, for Wrigley Field and the 7th inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Well, there we go. We enjoyed another great halftime show here on Tall Tales, and Jose just handed me something he pulled off the printer that it makes it appear that the Archdiocese listens to Tall Tales. When about 20 minutes ago I said I hadn't received a printout of the bishop's speech, I have it in my hand right now. I obviously won't have time to do anything with it today, but I will have time to do something. I will pick it up tomorrow, and we'll add it to the file known as Jane's Follies. Okay, back to Ketanji Brown Jackson and her embrace of the critical race theory. There's an article that ran on March 24 from a guy named Phil Shiver. Tulsi Gabbard point out absurdity of Biden's Scottish nominees refusing to define woman. Her womanhood was a key reason she was nominated. And I think this is important because it goes right back to what we were just talking about as far as rugby is concerned. That it's nowadays, you got to be politically correct. You got to follow the neighborhood, as you were the narrative. And that's what why Tulsi calls out the nominee. Former Democrat U.S. House Representative Tulsi Gabbard slammed Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson this week for refusing to define what a woman is during her Senate confirmation hearings, and in doing so, elucidated an interesting point. That is, Jackson's own womanhood is one of the primary reasons that Biden nominated her to the Supreme Court. During his presidential campaign in 2020, Biden vowed to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court should a vacancy arrive. And this year, when Justice Stephen Breyer announced his retirement, supporters held the president to his word. On Thursday, Gabbard reminded the president and his nominee of the pledge. In order to have a Supreme Court committed to protecting the rights of all Americans, including women, every justice needs to understand that there is such a thing as a woman, as distinct from a man. She tweeted, yet when asked to define the word woman, nominee Brown Jackson said, I don't know. The hypocrisy and absurdity of this, that she was nominated by President Biden in part because she is a woman, the Democrat aptly pointed out. During hearings on Tuesday, Jackson responded to a pointed question from Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn by claiming that she can't define the word woman because she's not a biologist. Can you provide a definition for the word woman? Blackburn said. Can I provide a definition? The judge replied, adding, no, I can't. You can't? Blackburn shot back. Not in this context, Jackson said, laughing.
Maybe she's also wants to be vice president.
Of course. Whenever anybody asks you a serious question, you must break out in a cackle. I'm not a biologist. So you believe the meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial you can't give a definition? Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is address disputes. Jackson answered, still deflecting. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the law and I decide. The issue of sexual orientation and gender identity has become a hot-button one of late amid the left's anti-scientific embrace of transgenderism and gender fluidity in general. The left's balancing act between staunchly supporting women's causes and the transgender agenda has proved difficult, especially when the two appear to clash, as in the case of the transgender biological male University of Pennsylvania swimmer Leah Thomas competing against women. Well, at least it wasn't rugby. It has put many progressives in a bind, making them unable to explain their perspective with any logical coherence. It seems the best option when confronted on the matter is to punt, to refuse to say anything at all, as Jackson herself demonstrated. But Gabbard wasn't keen to let Jackson off the hook that easily. Neither was Blaze TV host Jason Whitlock, who wrote this in Wednesday's column for The Blaze. Jackson does not lack common sense. She can define the word woman. If she can't, she should ask President Biden. He made it clear he picked Jackson because she's a black woman. Jackson's flaw is that her commitment to truth is fungible based on how truth impacts her politics. Whitlock continued, she's a politician, not a judge, and not an arbiter of truth. Her particular brand of politics, left-wing, requires her to eschew a biblical worldview that values truth above all else. Now imagine if Ketanji Brown Jackson were called in to rule on Guam Woke High School versus Tejon High. If Guam Woke High School, if Kerner had done what I said he should have done, stop the game and ask the ref to kick the male out of the game. If Ketanji Brown Jackson were ruling on that question, she'd say, I think the ruling is wrong, because how could anyone know that the player for Guam Woke High School wasn't a woman? That would be the politically correct answer.
Unless the coach is a science teacher.
Yeah. Something else about Jackson here too that I've got to get into the record. I notice I've got someone that wants to talk about this. That would be Frenchie, CRT and wokeness in today's topics. Go for it, Frenchie.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm doing good, Frenchie.
Good. Yeah, what we know our wokeness and what they push at CRT. You know, I was re-watching not long ago Jordan Peterson, the famous Canadian psychologist, and also Professor Saul. And basically, they agreed, you know, that those policies are meant to create resentment, anger, and ideology. And the reason for that is that they advance the fact that our society is based on corruption, oppression, and patriarchal tendencies. So that, to them, justifies the fact that we should be against free speech because free speech is a violence against minorities. And, you know, of course, Saul always asks, compare to what? Which is a very good question that usually just makes it very difficult for progressives to answer because they don't know compared to what, you know. Corruption compared to what? Oppression compared to what? Patriarchal oppression compared to what? The Muslim culture, the Hindu culture, the Chinese culture, they don't tell us. So basically, from this, they deduct that all truths are subjectives and that sexes differences are basically socially constructed and not biological. And that's why, you know, when the senator asked the judge, you know, why what do you think about women or whatever, she was not able, and she said, well, I'm not a biologist, which brought to me the joke that this lady from North Carolina said, and she said, well, you know, you might not be a biologist, but I'm not a vet, and I still know what a dog looks like. So, and this is the insanity of the whole thing. And basically that postmodernist movement that we have seen grow and grow since the 60s and 70s do not want free speech on campus. They are ready to have mobs close down the campus speakers that are coming to address some issues when they don't burn down the building like in Berkeley 2 years ago. And then they really enforce a language police, which is something that is basically destroying free speech because you can no longer use certain types of words and so on and so forth. So education basically nowadays from primary school, and we see it in many states, all the way to the university, no longer teach critical thinking, how to write clearly, and how to speak properly, which was the main goal of education for centuries. This is no longer happening. What you have is that you have an unholy trinity of diversity, equity, and I forgot the third one, but it's basically pushing those things. Diversity is based on racial differences. Equity is no longer the equality of opportunity, like, you know, basically what Martin Luther King was pushing in the 60s with the civil rights movement, but it is equality of outcome, which is totally stupid to the level because it is impossible. But then that gives rise for people to have grievances and demand for reparation. So what you have is that the radicals of the 60s and the 70s moved later on into politics and the academic world, and those are the people that are pushing for those new values as replacement of the patriarchal power of free speech and so on. They have basically resisting the values of the free market society, even though those values was raised billions of people out of poverty and lack of education, and they use our taxes to promote university deans that are deans on diversity, who swear that they will uproot discrimination where there is no discrimination, and they push new programs that are totally inane. I'm not going to go into it because I want to give opportunities for people to do that. But those are the same people that use their perception that they are smarter and they know better than the average citizen, the famous deplorables like in Hillary Clinton's speech, and to push on eugenics regarding abortion and everything. And it was very striking that Bill that called earlier in the preceding hour agreed with most of everything you said, but he was still worried about, the raising a child that comes from a rapist and things like that, which is typical of the bait and switch that those people are doing. They take the case of a child being born from a rapist and argue that he might take the genes of their father, which is typical eugenic theory, which have been debunked after the Nazis were put out of power. But then they're bringing back those things, and it's a bait and switch thing that was done in California to justify abortion, and we see it over and over again. That they put to a very high level of emotion the moral choice that a woman has to make, and take it and put it to the whole society, which is not something you can compare. And the same people, those same elites in the universities and politics that do know better than us and believe they are smarter and more aware of the challenges of the modern world, they are pushing those Malthus theories from the 19th century on population growth, and the new environmental religion that is being pushed on us for controlling population, accelerating death, and so on. And yet at the same time, they are not able to tell you what a woman really is. And that brings us the story of your rugby team. I played rugby for 18 years until my late 30s, and I tell you, it's a violent sport. And I'm less than 6 foot, but when you come running at full speed against a guy that's 6'5" and weighs 250 pounds, you feel it in your body. And to think that it doesn't make a difference because somebody has decided they are a woman rather than a man, I tell you what, that's why you have different rugby. You have rugby for women, where basically the national teams of each country can lose to a high school boys team. And then you have the masculine teams, and I just watched the Six Nation tournament finish. When you see how hard the hits are and how physically fit those people are, there is no comparison. It's very dangerous for people that are in good shape. And I tell you, if a man runs through a woman at full speed, he's going to break bones. And you might have confusion and all kind of things. And then we will see what happened at the University of Pennsylvania with that swimmer, where finally a lot of the female swimmers decided that they were going to boycott every further competition if this guy is still allowed to compete. Again, we go back to what I had said on other subjects. If you do not confront evil, and this transgender issue, which basically talks about a few dozen people, but is being pushed up by activists to deconstruct our society, if you don't confront this, like those coach refuse to do here on Guam, you are letting evil slowly seep in every level of our society, and it is very dangerous. So.
You laid it out pretty clearly, Frenchie, as is your usual custom, and that's the real tragedy of the rugby game. You know, it's bad enough that a boy's out there playing rugby with the girls, but it's even worse that grown-ups turn a blind eye to the whole thing. The Daily News didn't even cover it.
Well, they avoided it, and you see that in our media a lot. They avoid the truth, but they are very much as cheerleaders for fantasy world. And, we see it in many things. We see it right now in the conflict in Ukraine. We have the fantasy world against the real world. And when that fantasy world is going to come crash down because faced by reality, it's going to be very painful for a lot of people.
Right on, Frenchie. Frenchie, I got to go to Churchill Downs, but it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Well, it's always nice to go see the bluegrass.
Okay, Frenchie.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate, put cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch here. A couple more furlongs, and I'll be crossing the finish line and heading for home, starting the mourning period that tomorrow is Friday. It, of course, is Good Friday in our religion. But for Jose and I, there's really no Good Friday, as Friday is the end of our week here on Tall Tales. We somehow survive and come back on Monday, but it's tough. Okay, let's wrap up here. Let's talk a little bit more about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, Marsha Blackburn, and, this crazy warp that we're in now that Frenchie so clearly lays out, this deconstruction of society by taking things that we have always known as truth and fact and gaslighting us, so we're starting to have second thoughts. Well, can a guy... Is a man always got to be a man? What if he really feels like a woman? That kind of stuff, right? And then Frenchie got into what Herbert Marcuse calls selective tolerance, that we only tolerate viewpoints that are in accord with the narrative, and viewpoints that aren't in accord with the narrative must be squelched. Characterize them as violence. I got a note here from Bonnie Suba about this guy named Allen, whose first name I can't remember. He was elected to the House for one term, former soldier.
Allen West,
yeah. Yesterday there was a university where a student invited Colonel Allen West to speak, and the mob chased the speaker and tore down the physical podium. Then the mob went hunting for the student who invited that conservative speaker to the campus. This is how far it's gone.
Well, it's funny. There was this white girl yelling with the rest of the crowd, the African-American crowd, going, "Shout out loud, I'm black and I'm proud." Like what?
Yeah.
The narrative.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, and I mentioned last week how serious it was when that group of Yale law students shouted down a speaker, because those folks, you know, Yale and Harvard law students now are going to be running the world in 25 years. And it's really hard to find any good news. Even at a high school rugby game, you can't find any good news because people don't have the courage to stand up and confront evil when they see it right in front of their face. Well, back to Ketanji. You know, it's not just Ketanji that's confused. Ketanji is supported by USA Today. Who else, right? Going back to the Blackburn incident, and senators on both sides of the aisle have used Jackson's confirmation hearing to air issues that have less to do with Jackson's qualifications and more to do with their respective parties. USA Today here. The exchange reflects the current state of gender politics in the U.S. as transgender swimmer Leah Thomas' recent NCAA win sparked a fierce debate over trans athletes as a flurry of bills have sought to ban gender-affirming health care for trans youth. Gender-affirming health care for trans youth. Now, what that means is if you have a guy that wants to be a woman, he's entitled to gender-affirming health care, which means to remove the male plumbing and do the best you can to install female plumbing. That's gender-affirming health care. Now, I would describe it more graphically if I weren't on the air, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
The word mutilation would be a part of it.
Exactly. And other bills have banned trans girls from participating in K-12 girls sports. And what they're really saying is it banned men from participating in K-12 girls sports. If Jackson is confirmed, it's inevitable she will preside over cases involving trans rights. Now, here's USA Today. Scientists, gender law scholars, and philosophers of biology said Jackson's response was commendable, though perhaps misleading. It's useful, they say, that Jackson suggested science could help answer. Blackburn's question, they note, that a competent biologist would not be able to offer a definitive answer either. Scientists agree there is no sufficient way to clearly define what makes someone a woman, and with billions of women on the planet, there is much variation. I don't want to see this question punted to biology as if science can offer a simple, definitive answer, said Rebecca Jordan Young, a scientist and gender studies scholar at Barnard College, whose work explores the relationship between science and social hierarchies and gender sexuality. I'm going to stop there for a second here. I don't like the situation where I run out of time and leave a caller hanging on the line. So I'm going to come back to, what was her name?
Jackson.
Rebecca Jordan Young, yeah. Let's see, who have I got here? This is, the most dangerous man in the room. Okay. Let him have it, Carl.
Hey, Bob, good afternoon. I was listening to you and Jose and your callers as I was driving around. And always good company when I'm driving. But I just wanted to remind people that that we owe what is happening now, what we're seeing in society, at its root to Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci. I did not understand at the time when someone sent me a link to the local separatist movement. There were some of them meeting, discussing Gramsci, and I couldn't understand why in the world would, this local group be meeting to discuss this obscure Italian Marxist. I didn't get it. But the more I read about him, the more I came to appreciate, although I think his ideas are, the outcome is evil, but I have to admire his kind of genius. He was imprisoned by Mussolini in 1926, and he was in prison for 11 years. And I think he died in prison or shortly thereafter. But it was in prison. He wrote his 13 prison notebooks. And it was in the 70s for the first time that those prison notebooks were translated. And in them, he conceived of the innovation of moving away from violent revolution and toward infiltration of Western institutions and the entering the institutions that create culture, the culture-creating institutions, the churches, politics, the media, movies, universities, public schools, and this is exactly what they're seeing. And I'll just leave with one quick quote that I think sums up Gramsci in a nutshell. This is a quote by Gramsci: "Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media, by transforming the consciousness of society." I mean, this is exactly what we are seeing. I never thought it would work. If someone told me this 20 or 30 years ago, I'd have thought they were out of their mind. And this could never possibly work. But once you capture the universities and start indoctrinating and converting people, and these people start going out into the culture, it just spreads like a virus. And that is exactly what we have. We have a virus that has been started, the first iteration, by Antonio Gramsci. And I would place him as one of the top three most important Marxists in history. First being, of course, Karl Marx himself. The second being Lenin, with Lenin's innovations. And the third being Antonio Gramsci. So we need to give credit where it's due. Antonio Gramsci.
Yeah, you're absolutely
genius.
You're absolutely right, Carl. And it has worked, I think, beyond his wild dreams. Disneyland. Talk about influencing the culture, capturing the culture. Disneyland, the Magic Kingdom, where everybody wanted to take his children, now is as woke as the Frankfurt School.
And it's here on Guam. I mean, this was, I believe, in early 2018 when this meeting took place at Coffee Slut, and this group was discussing the ideas of Antonio Gramsci and how to adapt them and how to use them to advance the local agenda. So it's here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I just wanted to remind people, and I think we can't remind them too often, that this is what is happening, and a lot of it has to, we can credit to the brilliant ideas, brilliant but evil ideas of Antonio Gramsci. Anyway, Bob, that's my 2 bits. Thank you for letting me chime in.
Okay, I'm not going to give you any change today, Carl. Good comments. Thank you, sir. Yeah, the most dangerous man in the room, Antonio Gramsci, picked up from the Frankfurt School, 1922. We've talked about that here a lot. And the idea was that Marx's idea of the proletarian revolution, that the workers would upset the bourgeoisie, turned out to not work. But the Frankfurt School said what we have to do is kind of like what Carl said. We've got to infiltrate the institutions of the capitalist world and take them in our direction. And Gramsci reduced it to the state of an art. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Even a high school rugby game. No one can go to a high school rugby game, a girls' high school rugby game, and see a boy out there knocking the girls on the ground and do anything about it. Because, well, and the one word here that comes in that makes everything okay, transgender. I think, I may very well banish the use of the word transgender from my mouth. A man is a man, You don't have to say he's a cisgender man or a transgender man or a gay man or a straight man. A man is a man is a man, and a woman is a woman. And the farther we get away from that elemental truth, the farther we go down this path of evil and destruction. All right, so we're there again. It's time for me to say that I'll see you tomorrow, and let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Fox News arrested Wednesday in Lower Manhattan.
The 29-hour manhunt for James came to an end just before 2 p.m. when none other than Frank James himself reportedly called Crime Stoppers and told them that he was at a McDonald's in the Lower East Side. When police arrived, he wasn't at the McDonald's. An eyewitness tells Fox News he saw James walking a block away and told police. Investigators say after attacking the Brooklyn subway station, James managed to escape by boarding an adjacent train, which was carrying wounded passengers to the next station.
Fox's Brian Yennis. James now facing federal charges of committing a terrorist act on a mass transit system.
He will be arraigned in federal court in Brooklyn, and if convicted, he will face a sentence of up to life imprisonment.
That's U.S. Attorney Breon Peace. The mask mandate for planes and other modes of mass transit will not end next week. The Centers for Disease Control extending it another 2 weeks over the coronavirus BA2 variant.
To assess its potential impact, the rise of the cases have on severe disease, including hospitalizations and deaths, and the healthcare system capacity. And their assessment from a medical standpoint, a data gathering standpoint, is that 2 weeks would give them some additional time to do that.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says after 2 weeks they could drop the mask requirement or extend it again. The Labor Department reporting the Producer Price Index was up a record 11.2% last month from March of last year.
This is the price that companies are paying to get the materials to make the stuff that they sell. It also could mean that we have not seen the peak inflation yet because the costs here get passed on to consumer.
Edward Lawrence of the Fox Business Network reports some economists now fear continued inflation will harm the economy and possibly trigger a recession. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news